Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of The List Show, Volume 5, New Home Smell, the top 20 films of 2004. Reason why it's called New Home Smell is back in 2004, I had been married for a year, been with my wife for 4 years, and we bought our first house, the same one I'm working from right now. So we've been in this house for 20 years as well. So have that. So moved to Reisterstown. So brand new surroundings, brand new house, brand new beginning of our life. 2 years later, our daughter came along. So this is getting near the end of our honeymoon phase, I guess, before we became parents. But this house has sustained us for 20 years, and 2004 is when we moved in. Now, 2004 was a good year for movies, actually. As I mentioned earlier, maybe you might not have read my tag, but there are 6 sequels in this list. There's a Harry Potter. There's early comic book movies before the MCU, which we'll talk to about a little bit, and a whole lot of other really interesting, cool stuff. I really like this list because I really like most all the movies on this list. I mean, I like that's why they're in my top list. I like all the movies that are on my list, but this one is just these are ones that I can watch multiple times over and over. Not all of them, but a lot of them I can. And whenever I come across them on TV, I can watch them as well. Real quick though, on a side note that has nothing to do with this because this actor does not appear in any of these movies, but just got word that great character actor John Ashton, who was in Beverly Hills Cop, played Taggart in Beverly Hills Cop, was also in the Beverly Hills Cop series, played 3 of the 4 movies. He was in them, and was also in Midnight Run, and there might have been a few other ones that I missed, but those are his big ones. He passed away today, making him the second of the 3 celebrities that died, with Maggie Smith passing away the other day on Friday. Maggie Smith does appear on our list this week, so interesting. So we'll cover John Ashton's career a little bit more in my next episode of Dylan Knows, which will be on Saturday, October 5th. So here we are, September 29th. It's really interesting that I picked this date, 2004, because as I said, this was we moved into our house, this house we're in now, that I've been in now, and moved to Reisterstown. I've lived here now for 20 plus years. My wife and I's first date, anniversary of it, is today. Our first date was September 29th, 2000. It's September 29th, 2024. So we've been together for 24 years. Married for 21 as of Friday. Friday's our wedding anniversary, October 4th. All around good thing. The Ravens, my football team, I'm wearing all black because they're playing Sunday Night Football tonight. So that's why I'm doing the show again, because they have the late game. Next week, they play the early game against the Bengals, who are presently winning right now. Looks like Joe Burrow might have gotten hurt again. So we'll see what happens with that. So that being said, 2004, as I said, was a great year for film. Also a great year, as I said, for me. This house, new Reisterstown, and a lot of these I saw in movie theaters. Now, not every one of these I saw in movie theaters. Some I've seen on Blu-ray, DVD, or on cable or whatever. So I will try to mention which ones I remember seeing in movie theaters. I think one. Wow, maybe there's as many as I thought there was. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, only 6 of them. So I have 6 sequels and 6 movies. I thought I saw more than that in movie theaters, but I guess I didn't. But there's good variety here, a good wide variety of stuff. So as always with my list show, this is the top 20 films of 2004. But as always, I always have an honorable mention that I start with one that didn't quite make the list, but should be one you should check out. My honorable mention for the top films of 2004 is Collateral, Michael Mann's Tom Cruise, Jamie Foxx movie. You can say whatever you want about Tom Cruise. He is kind of a weirdo with his Scientology stuff and the weird things that are going on. He seems to have mellowed out a little bit over the last few years. And in the early 80s, I despised him because he was a cocky SOB. But he's always proven to be a decent actor despite his weird tendencies. And Collateral just continues to show that with him playing a semi-villainous role as a hitman who commandeers Jamie Foxx's cab and forces him to take him on a number of hits as they're trying to evade police and other hitmen and people like that. Michael Mann's a great director, and I'm thinking I'm going to throw Heat into my pile of movies I'm going to be watching next weekend. But Collateral is a good film to definitely check out. A different side to Tom Cruise, even getting a bit more of a grayish hair look to it. Michael Mann knows how to do action. Jamie Foxx is always pretty good when he does stuff. Again, breaking the barriers because he always appeared to be a comedic actor. And he's broken out and done action films and dramas and stuff like that. So Collateral is a good team up of those two with Michael Mann directing them. So fantastic movie. That is my honorable mention, though, just because I have 20 other movies I like before that. And you're probably going to laugh at me because my number 20 is Mean Girls, a iconic film which has been turned into a musical. And that musical has been turned into a musical movie. Lindsay Lohan, just before she started on her downward spiral, and you got to give her credit also because she's dug her way out of her downward spiral and is now married with children and has been doing films again and has not been a hellish she-wolf. Everyone who's been making the most recent films with her, most of which are just easy Netflix, Hallmark-esque sort of movies, have said that she's professional, she's on time, she's not showing up inebriated or all out of her mind. I mean, she's clean, she's sober, she's happy, she's a mom now. And Jamie Lee Curtis has always been loving her. And the two of them just finished filming Freaky Friday, not Freaky Friday. It is Freaky Friday, right? Or whatever the sequel to that. So you got to give her credit, but this was probably like the last movie before she went on her downward spiral, really, where she really showed her potential. Great cast, Tina Fey, Tim Meadows in there as well. And I forget who the other Mean Girls are, because it was a wide variety of good actresses. It was a good, I forget, but Mean Girls. Mean Girls, there's 2004 there. Rachel McAdams, Anna Gasteyer, Amy Poehler, Lizzie Kaplan. I guess there isn't that. McAdams. I guess Rachel McAdams was the other big one. Let's see. Lindsay, Rachel McAdams, Tina Fey, Tim Meadows, Amy Poehler, Anna Gasteyer, Lacey Chabray. I forgot about her. Lizzie Kaplan. Amanda Seyfried. Yep. So great cast. Good script from Tina Fey. And I said Lindsay's last really good performance before she went on her downward spiral. But definitely number 20 on the list. Number 19 is Shrek 2, the first of our 6 sequels. Not as good as the original Shrek. The original Shrek was just so original and was entertaining. And there are aspects of the second one which are fun, where you actually get Julie Andrews, and I think it's Julie Andrews as her mom, and John Cleese as Cameron Diaz's parents. I'm pretty sure it's Julie Andrews. Yeah. Mike Myers, Eddie Murphy, Cameron Diaz all return to their distinctive roles: Shrek, Donkey, and Princess Fiona. Julie Andrews and John Cleese are the king and queen and the mother and father of Cameron Diaz. Antonio Banderas's Puss in Boots was introduced in this, a phenomenal character that got his own spin-off. Rupert Everett playing the oily Prince Charming, and Jennifer Saunders as the evil fairy godmother's the bad guy. We also have Joan Rivers, Larry King, and a lot of the other main characters from the previous stuff. So it's an entertaining film. Not, as I said, not as good as the first one, and maybe it's time I do a rewatch of it. I just remember it takes place in Far, Far Away, which is the place where Cameron Diaz's character grew up, and we try to figure out what her relationship with her parents, because they took her away because she was turning into this ogre, and then the fairy godmother trying to take over the kingdom, John Cleese turning into a frog, Shrek and Donkey, well, Shrek turning human, Donkey turning into a stallion. The introduction of Puss in Boots by Antonio Banderas is a classic, is fantastic, and is a great character added to the group. And maybe it's time I need to do a rewatch on Shrek 2, but it's not as good as the first one, as I recall. Giant size Kaiju Gingy also makes an appearance in here as well. A decent sequel, as I said, not as good as the first one. And again, maybe it's one I need to rewatch again, but Shrek 2 is number 19. Number 18 finds Julie Andrews again, this time with the luscious Anne Hathaway. And even Chris Pine makes an appearance in this as well. The Princess Diaries 2. Again, not as good as the original one. And again, maybe one I need to rewatch again, because this was one of Chris Pine's earliest films. And he and Anne Hathaway do seem to have some sort of chemistry. But I am not the biggest fan of the story. I understand the reasoning for it. Anne Hathaway's character, Mia, is now princess of Slovenia, whatever the name of their country is. And she is getting prepped to be the queen. And in order to do that, she needs to have an arranged marriage. So she ends up having an arranged marriage with a wonderful, awesome, great guy, a prince from another country, who the two of them get along really, really well. They had really good chemistry as well. But the problem is neither of them were into each other. And the prince is in love with somebody else from his country. And Anne Hathaway just doesn't want to get married yet. She still wants to live her life. And then, of course, there's John Rhys Davies playing the bad guy who plays either the father or the uncle of Chris Pine's character, who claims to have a claim to the throne. And if Anne Hathaway rejects the throne, then Chris Pine, his son or grandson or nephew, or whatever, I'm not sure, will be able to claim the crown and take over the country. Once Julie Andrews' character is retires or removed or whatever. Plus, we have her and Hector Elizondo's relationship getting amped up to this next level, and we get a little bit of a drama between them because Hector Elizondo really is in love with her, and we saw it in the first one, and he's really kind of not pressuring her, but really wants to, be with her, and she is still on the fence about it, and it's like crushing him and stuff like that. Other than that, it's the storyline itself is just so. John Rhys Davies decides to send Chris Pine to try to woo Anne Hathaway and get her, a scandal erupting and stuff like that. And the two of them have a hate-love situation, and I did not enjoy the story that much. Obviously, because I'm colored by the first one, which is so good. But at the same time, I'm just not sure. But that's why it's at number 18. But still, the Princess Diaries movies are fun. They're non-threatening, enjoyable, family-oriented stuff. And young Anne Hathaway is, as always, gorgeous. So on we move. Number 17 might surprise you. 2004 was the first era of comic book movies. Started back in 97 with the arrival of Wesley Snipes' Blade, and that did really well, so they did the sequel, Blade 2. 1999 brought the arrival of the X-Men. No, 2000. That'll be next year. 2000 brought about the arrival of the X-Men. We'll talk about that next year when we do the top 25 movies of 2000. So X-Men debuted in 2000. Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire, directed by Sam Raimi, and Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin, popped up in 2001. And then we got, I guess, Superman Returns. Might have been 2004, but it didn't make my list because it's actually, while it's interesting and had a good, I like the Superman and I like Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor. The story was just basically kind of a rehash of the original Superman with Christopher Reeve, set in the same world like that, and having Superman disappear for 5 years after impregnating Lois Lane and coming back to discover he has a son. I don't think it made my list. I think Superman Returns was 2004 because I think I was still working at Diamond at that time. Let me just verify that, and that's why it's not on my list. 2006, actually. So, okay, so we'll get there eventually. I think it might be on my list for that because I have one for my daughter because she turns 18. So we'll do the top 18 movies of 2006 probably for her birthday in December. It might be on the list. I'm not sure. It's, as I said, not a great one, but regardless, it doesn't matter because it's 2 years in the future. So you have that. You've got X-Men 2 and all that stuff rolling through here, and you're starting to get a lot more comic booky sort of stuff. People are seeing that they're fairly popular. I think Blade 3 pops up in there eventually as well, and a whole bunch of other ones we'll talk about a little later. But the Punisher was one of those where it's a character that is well loved by comic fans. And Dolph Lundgren did a version of it, but it wasn't quite, it was before the era of comic books. I mean, they had the early ancestors was Christopher Reeve Superman. And then I think it rolled into like the Howard the Ducks and then the Dolph Lundgren Punisher. Then we entered the next era where we have Tim Burton's Batman, and we had a resurgence of sort of stuff with that. And then we have this new era with Blade and all that stuff. So, but the Punisher is one of those where they saw potential because comic book movies were starting to become pretty big hits. Not as big as they went on to be in 2007, 2008 when the MCU started, but they were still kind of, fairly popular at this time. And the Punisher was one of those early ones where, what's his name? Guy who was in The Mist, Thomas Jane, played the Punisher, and John Travolta was the bad guy because Travolta was still kind of in a hot zone, but he was starting to get cool really quickly as well. And it was based on Garth Ennis's Punisher, which at the time was a pretty decent Punisher comic. Introduced a bunch of new characters, had found Frank Castle living in like a tenement where he has run-ins with like the quiet, mousy neighbor and the geeked out, metalhead sort of guy. And you get a little bit of the Punisher-ness, but it's not as violent as you would expect from a Punisher movie, and it's a bit almost comic booky in some aspects of it. Though one of the greatest scenes ever is when the Punisher is interrogating a guy who tried to kill him. He's got like his shirt off and his pants off. He's going in his underwear or whatever. He's being hung from these chains, and he shows the guy like a red hot spear and is going to torture him for information. And the guy sees that and he starts panicking a little bit. But then what the Punisher does is he switches it and puts an ice cream cone or ice cream bar and puts it on the back of his body, saying, "Yeah, you might not feel, it might feel cool to you because it's the heat is like destroying all your nerves or whatever." And the guy thinks he's getting tortured by this burning hot. That's one of the funny, and the guy screaming and yelling, and he's like in pain, even though it's an ice cream cone, ice cream bar hitting him. It's one of the most hilarious scenes in the movie. But as I said, it's not quite as violent as you would expect a Punisher movie to be. The villain, John Travolta's villain, is kind of not really a major presence. And it takes place in Florida for some reason. Go figure. But for a early era pre-MCU comic book movie, Punisher is not bad. It spun off a sequel called Punisher War Journal, which was a bit more brutal with Ray Stevenson taking over the role, was a bit more like you expect the Punisher to be. And then eventually John Barenthal took over the role and made it his own in the Netflix and now the soon-to-be Daredevil MCU show coming out next year. And made that the definitive Punisher character. But this one was the first. Don't really count the Dolph Lundgren one because he really doesn't count that much. It was using the Punisher names and stuff like that and had the whole skull thing, but it was more along the lines of like a typical action revenge thriller type of thing. Wasn't really, and connected to the comic book. This is much more connected to the comic book because it basically is adapting a Garth Ennis story for the most part. So interesting movie. As I said, not like a outstanding MCU era sort of film, but a decent, entertaining film. If you got nothing else to do, you have it, just pop it in there. You want some mindless fun. It's good there. That was one of the ones I actually saw in the movie theater because I thought it was going to be pretty cool because I was a comic book guy. And it's decent enough to be number 17 on my list. Number 16, we're talking about he was already. The world was introduced to Hugh Jackman in 2000 as Wolverine. And then again, I believe in 2002 with X-Men 2. So he had sort of, a following there, but they wanted to see what he could do outside of Wolverine. So number 16 is what was supposed to be a tentpole movie for the summer in May of 2004. It was the one that set off the summer movie saga at the beginning of May. Saw this in the movie theater with my wife. It's Van Helsing, directed by Stephen Sommers, who was the guy who directed Brendan Fraser's The Mummy movie. And Hugh Jackman plays Van Helsing. He is the vampire hunter that ends up going after vampires and werewolves, stuff like that. It's a decent horror action film, but again, not one that's not as memorable and not as good at all as The Mummy was. But it has its moments, and I think it also has. Is that Beckinsale in it? Yeah, it has the hottie Kate Beckinsale in it as well. In an outstanding role as well because I like her too. Kate Beckinsale, Hugh Jackman, Kate Beckinsale, Richard Roxburgh, David Wenham, Kevin J. O'Connor. So Robbie Coltrane is the voice of Mr. Hyde. So actually, he takes on Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, meets Victor Frankenstein, takes on vampires, takes on Frankenstein's monster. Thing takes on a werewolf in there, if I remember correctly. So this is another one a lot of these movies in 2004, I like a lot of them. And there are some that I will watch over and over again, but there's some like Van Helsing or Shrek 2 or The Punisher, Princess Diaries that I should probably rewatch again. Because I saw them, and then I might have saw them one other time between now and then, but it doesn't really count really as much. So Van Helsing might be one of those that I might need to evaluate in this upcoming spooky season. It might be one to come up, rewatch it again. My daughter hadn't seen it yet, so maybe watch it with her. But yeah, I mean, I forgot that he took on all the different Universal monsters in this one. And it is Hugh Jackman who is portraying someone other than Wolverine. It did decent, but I don't think it did like Mummy numbers and is not as well regarded as The Mummy is. So that's why it's number 16 on my list. After one of my absolute favorite M. Night Shyamalan movies, Signs, his next film is number 15 on my list, is The Village. This one has gotten a lot of hate, and they believe this is the beginning of his downward spiral. I disagree with that. The movie did decent in the movie theaters. Didn't do Signs numbers, but it did somewhere between a little bit less than Signs and Sixth Sense, but still decent enough that he was able to do Lady in the Lake, or Lady in the Water. That's what was Lady in the Water, which was the real kind of beginning of his downward spiral as well. But The Village is a very entertaining film that I think what pissed off a lot of people was the twist at the end. And again, what made it a really interesting movie again was Sci-Fi, after the success of their mockumentary about the Blair Witch Project, did a mockumentary about the making of The Village, and sort of eschewing that M. Night Shyamalan is the devil. And I know it sounds weird, but the way that they filmed it and the way it was an advertisement for the movie, and it has the atmosphere that you want for it. But I think a lot of people did not like it in the end due to the twist. There's actually two twists basically in the movie. And one of them I'm kind of peeved about, but the other one I'm okay with. And I think I cannot. It's been 20 years since these movies came out, and maybe because I doubt it, you see this on my list that you might be interested. If you've never seen it, and want to see it. But I do want to kind of get into spoiler territory because there's really is no way I can really talk about this movie without talking about the endings, the two sort of twists at the end. But the premise to begin with is outstanding. You have, it looks like it takes place in like the 1600s. Everyone's wearing old style, like Sleepy Hollow sort of costumes, old style, old English sort of costumes. They're speaking in kind of not a typical, English way, like we're talking here, like we are, present day, whatever sort of way. And it's a community that is living peacefully and happily. They're having children, they're going to schools, they're getting their exercise, they're doing their chores. But in order to make sure that nobody leaves the village ever, it's surrounded by a ring of woods. They tell a tale of monsters that live in the woods. And if you try to go too far out without anybody with you to try to leave the village or whatever, these monsters are going to come and get you and you're going to disappear. Again, awesome setup. That's a really cool idea. Creepy, colonial age sort of village with a creepy monster surrounded by woods, old English sort of thing. And then there's some issues. There's a guy in there, I think played by Adrian Brody, who is kind of not right. And you can make that as a case of being mentally deficient or maybe due to incestual pairings, since there's not a lot of people you can choose from for your relationships. So you're probably going to be related to them in some way or another. Again, great cast: Sigourney Weaver, William Hurt, Joaquin Phoenix, Bryce Dallas Howard. I believe it's Adrian Brody. Is there anybody else I'm missing in that cast? John Hurt's William Hurt. I think I said William Hurt. Let me just. I should probably, when I do these, I should write down the cast, but it's just as easy to do it while you're watching. So, Bryce Dallas Howard, Joaquin Phoenix, Adrian Brody, Sigourney Weaver, William Hurt, Brendan Gleeson's in it. Okay. Cherry Jones, Judy Greer. Okay. I forgot about that. Jesse Eisenberg. Really? M. Night Shyamalan, of course, is in it as well. Okay. So, good cast. A very interesting storyline. And it follows Bryce Dallas Howard's character, who is a blind woman who is set up to be married to Joaquin Phoenix's character. And Adrian Brody's character, the mentally deficient one, is somewhat jealous, I think, of the pairing or whatever. I think he likes Bryce Dallas Howard, but he is mentally deficient, so he doesn't really understand the feelings that he has, but he kind of loses his mind. And that's a little bit of the aspect of it. You all right, bro? You okay? You're dying? Okay. My son's dying, but he's fine. Are you do your dryer now? Okay. Hello. Yeah, that's my son. You didn't see him. You heard him though. But in order to, prove to the, in order to have proof that there are monsters out there, they go through drills where they believe they see some of the monsters coming into the village and going after people or stealing stuff as well, to make sure that they're aware that you do not enter the woods, and they'll still come and attack you, and you need to get into your hiding spots to keep you safe and away from stuff and cautious about stuff. And then that's where things start going a little haywire, and where we're going to get into a little bit of spoiler territory. So if you do not want to hear anything about the spoilers, I recommend now pausing this video. I'll do something like this when I'm done talking about the spoilers. But I kind of have to just discuss this, and reason why it's number 15 on my list, and why people might not have liked this much. Now, the first spoiler that we're going to discuss is that turns out that the monsters themselves are actually just members of the village putting on costumes and running around and making noises and doing stuff like that to scare the people into believing that there are monsters out in the woods so they don't leave the village. That in itself is okay. That's interesting. You're overly cautious. There really isn't any monsters out there, but you don't want them to even try to leave the village. So you got to make them be afraid of something. And that, I guess, is an okay twist. I mean, it kind of ruins it for me because then it means that there was not real any supernatural aspect to it. I kind of like that. That's the way it was in the old days. It was very supernatural aspect. But you can't say, but at the same time, the supernatural aspects that happened in the old days really didn't happen either. Witches, demons, also that didn't happen. It was just something that they didn't quite understand at that time in the 1600s. So that's been said. That's what happened. So what ends up happening is that Joaquin Phoenix character gets attacked, I believe, by Adrian Brody's character, and is like stabbed or whatever. And he's dying, and they don't have the medical staff or facilities to take care of Joaquin Phoenix's wound, and he's going to slowly bleed out and die. So I don't know why they chose her for this. But the parents, William Hurt and Sigourney Weaver, end up telling Bryce Dallas Howard that about the monsters not being real and that she needs to go through the woods and there's like a wall that she's got to climb and she'll be able to find the stuff that can cure Joaquin Phoenix over this wall. So she freaks out a little bit, but she ends up deciding to do it, which again kind of is a weird thing for her to do because she is blind, and I don't understand why one of them didn't go with her or go in her place, so to keep the illusion alive. Because first of all, where we discover Adrian Brody has run away after he stabs Joaquin Phoenix. He's run away. He's grabbed one of the monster costumes and is in the woods now being the monster, and he starts to stalk Bryce Dallas Howard's character, and Bryce Dallas Howard is able to eventually turn the tables on him and he ends up getting killed. And so she makes her way to the wall, and here's where the second spoiler comes in. She traverses the wall, and she's on a road, and then all of a sudden you hear a motor, and you look over, and it is a car, modern day car, and Night Shyamalan's in the car, and we learn that this national park, this village, the forest where the village is actually set in present day. And Sigourney Weaver and William Hurt and everyone who created the town were a bunch of hippies in the 70s who saw that the world was ending and not being great. They needed a place to keep their families safe because the world was filled with war and hatred and violence, and they needed a place that didn't have that. So apparently they are rich enough that they were able to buy the forest, build their village, were able to make sure that it was a no-fly zone, so no airplanes would fly overhead, and they would live in peace for like the 20, 30 years since they started this thing. Again, kind of a far reach when it comes to stuff, but an interesting premise nonetheless. And so she goes to the local police department. M. Night takes her there, and they get the medical supplies they need, and she goes back and saves the day. I think not really understanding what was going on. So that's where the twist is. And I guess that's where a lot of people don't like The Village. And I think it's an okay twist. I think it's fine. If you dig deeper and look into it a little deeper, it doesn't quite make a lot of sense. I mean, it makes sense that they want to live and be safe and keep their family away from violence and horror and all that stuff. That's understandable. But to fork out all the money to own that property and to force a no-fly zone over the area, I don't even know how they would even do that unless somehow these rich hippies had influences in the local government or even the federal government for that matter to make sure that happens. So that's where you got a little bit of an aspect to it. But that's why I think a lot of people don't like it. It's atmospheric as hell. And as I said, once the monster twist is revealed, the film starts to die a little bit, despite the fact that the finale between Adrian Brody dressed as the monster and the blind Bryce Dallas Howard sequence in the woods is actually really intense as well, and is a lot of fun. And then the twist about it being the modern day is I'm okay with the twist, but I can understand why other people might not be. So that's why The Village is number 15, and why I talked a whole lot about The Village. But there we go. So people who didn't want to hear spoilers, you can turn on your speaker, unmute, whatever. We're doing number 14 now. There we go. Or 14. Because it's sort of reverse. Hellboy is number 14. Again, as I talked about, they're doing the comic book. This is sort of that comic book early era, pre-MCU, where people are just throwing any comic book movie they can at it and see if it sticks. Hellboy is a great comic. Mike Mignola is the writer and sometimes artist of Hellboy, was the artist on the main Hellboy storylines, but there's been a whole bunch of offshoot storylines that were done by Richard Corbin and other artists as well. And I like the comic book series. It's a great idea. A demon baby appears and is taught to be a investigator, where he teams up with a fishman who was discovered on the day that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and a fire starter and a guy made of smoke who has to be inside a metal body. It's a great idea for a cast, and the storylines are so good in the comics, and the artwork is so perfect for it. And there's even a documentary, which I'm going to watch eventually, maybe this weekend, of Mike Mignola's creation of Hellboy. It's an hour and 36-minute long. It's on Prime right now. It's going to cost like $30, but it should be fun to watch and check it out, because I love Mike Mignola and I love the artwork. That being said, Guillermo del Toro decided that he wanted to direct the Hellboy movie. Cast Ron Perlman, who was perfect casting. It was pretty decent casting. And they adapted a couple of the early storylines that Mike Mignola worked on. But Guillermo del Toro decides that a straight up adaptation of the Hellboy stuff is not going to work, because he's trying to get the widest audience possible. Understandable. You want to make as much money back, because this is a character that not a lot of people know about. And Ron Perlman is a character actor, but he's not a big star. So you need to make your money back. And people like Guillermo del Toro, but at this time, he was not like the film snobs absolutely adored him, but the local populace only knew him really from Blade 2 and Mimic. Those were really the only two that they would know him from, which are okay movies, but nothing that screams Guillermo del Toro. So what he ended up doing is he had to expand the storyline and do stuff that is not in the comics, which has Hellboy falling in love with the woman who is the fire starter. Doesn't happen in the comics. They're just friends. Hellboy does not have any real relationships in the comics, and he's not supposed to. The whole thing is him, Mike Mignola drawing crazy, weird creatures, demonic sort of looking creatures, and Hellboy fighting them. And then they also added, again, I understand why you added him, a rookie officer of the BPRD to learn the trade, be Hellboy's handler, whatever you want to call it. And he's the everyman. It's the viewer's entranceway into this weird world is through this character. It's movie cliche 101. It makes absolute sense to have something like that when you have a established idea that not a lot of people know about, how you want to enter into it, but then every man doing it makes sense. But because they had to make this romance between Hellboy and the Firestarter. They end up having this everyman also be part of the romantic triangle. Again, another stupid cliche that brings nothing to the table. The romance doesn't bring anything to the table. Might up the ante a little bit, but it didn't really. The fact that the world could end should be enough of a way to get you to up the ante to stop the bad guy, and to have this everyman just be a total tool. Now, in Hellboy 2, The Golden Army, the sequel is a little bit better than the first one because they get rid of the everyman. They keep the relationship between the Firestarter and Hellboy, but it's in the back burner, and we get more of the adventures in the horror. So The Golden Army is a lot better than the original Hellboy. But that being said, the original Hellboy is still a unique movie experience, is introduction to a great character. Ron Perlman actually kills it in the role, is fantastic in the role, and has great makeup, looks like Hellboy should be. The villains look like they should be, and it's just these minor aspects to the story. If the Firestarter was not a romantic interest, she's great also. If the Everyman was not part of this and wasn't quite as moronic as he is in the movie, and not being treated as badly as he is, that could be kind of interesting as well. There's also some other aspects to the storyline that are a little off-putting or off-kilter that don't make a lot of sense. So the story is kind of a mess, but visually it's a really good adaptation of Hellboy and is one of the best versions of the character out there. I think David Harbour's version went a little too far, and the Crooked Man one looks decent. Is actually adapting an actual Hellboy storyline and doing it straight up adaptation, but will only be available on Prime in October. I'll probably check it out, but this original Hellboy is good, but the story is not great. It does have aspects of the original Hellboy stories, but it's the other stuff that they lumped into that instead of just showing the adaptation of the stories, which makes this movie only be number 14 for me on the list. Again, those just showing us is the top 20 films of 2004. We're on number 13 right now. 13 is Roland Emmerich's The Day After Tomorrow. Jake Gyllenhaal, Dennis Quaid. Disaster film. Roland Emmerich loves his disaster films. 2012, Independence Day, Godzilla, stuff like that. Loves destroying stuff. Loves it. Now, Stargate was one where he didn't destroy stuff, but every other movie he's done since then, for the most part, it's been like a disaster film. Day After Tomorrow is no different. The disaster in this one is a massive ice age is restarting, and it is spreading fast across the North Pole into the United States, forcing people to have to invade Mexico and make it the new part of America, which is a whole nother political aspect that is touched on briefly in the film and is kind of a weird aspect to it and doesn't really get a answer to the situation, because Mexico isn't just going to let a bunch of stupid Americans come into their country. And it's I get it's a reverse border problem sort of thing. I get what he's doing with the politics on that. But the ice age is moving quickly. You see people freezing to death. You see New York City freeze completely. You see wolves running around on the freezingness. You see the group of people stave off the polar freezing by using fires, by burning books in the library. So Day After Tomorrow is a very political film, veiled as a disaster film. You got the burning books thing, the border patrol thing, the climate change thing. And Jake Gyllenhaal is boring. I'm not the biggest fan of Jake Gyllenhaal. I thought the best thing I ever saw him in was Mysterio in the Spider-Man movie. And then Dennis Quaid is just Dennis Quaid. He's okay in some of the roles he does, but the film is the visuals, the destruction. It starts off with water, and then it turns into ice, and then they stave off the ice by burning books in the New York Public Library. The United States has to move into Mexico because the ice age is spreading to the midway point between the United States the Southwest and the Central area. The whole Eastern Seaboard's frozen up. Yeah, but again, the reason why it's number 13 is just the spectacle. Yes, it's very political, but the spectacle of disaster films always is rooted in people's need to see destruction, and that's why Twister and Dante's Peak and Armageddon are all hugely popular movies. And The Day After Tomorrow is no different than that. Maybe if I would have thought about, maybe I would move it a little bit further back, maybe closer to like 16, and maybe move like The Village up a little bit. But The Day After Tomorrow is number 13 as of now. These lists are not set in stone. I can always change it out again. But the veiled political commentary of Day After Tomorrow is fascinating. And the spectacle of utter destruction is always fun to watch, particularly in the form of a new ice age happening. I'm not the biggest Adam Sandler fan when it comes to him making the movies. I am a big Adam Sandler fan because I think he's one of the smartest guys out there. I also know he's one of the nicest guys out there. But, and I've said this a million times before, I'm going to give him credit every time. When streaming was in its infancy, Netflix was just starting to get into the streaming, was still considered a mail order DVD place. But it was venturing into streaming. Adam Sandler took a look at that and had a vision that streaming is going to be the future. He believes that, mail is going away. People wanting to mail order DVDs is not the way it's going to be anymore. People prefer just to turn on their TV and have the stuff there. So he rightfully believed that the streaming services are going to be the future of entertainment. So he was one of the first actors to go to Netflix and say, here's what we're going to do. To help you get off your feet, I'm going to sign a contract with you. You're going to pay me like $100 million, something like that. And I will provide for you like 5 movies that are only going to be able to be seen on Netflix in order to get people to come and subscribe, because they're not going to be able to see them in the movie theaters. They're not going to be on DVD and Blu-ray. They're going to be on Netflix and Netflix only. Netflix thought about this a little bit, and they said, Adam Sandler is still one of the highest grossing actors of our time. This makes a hell of a lot of sense. Let's make the deal. They made the deal, and Adam stuck to it. He made a ton of movies direct to Netflix. Every single movie he's done for Netflix, no matter how bad, how good, whatever, has been a hit for Netflix. It helped increase people to buy subscriptions to Netflix because they wanted to see the new Adam Sandler movie. It did create some new good characters for him. His mystery movies with Jennifer Aniston, murder mystery movies with Jennifer Aniston are big hits. And he's still doing it. I mean, he saw how popular it was, and he's still doing it. Happy Gilmore 2 is presently being filmed. I think it's going to be direct to Netflix. I don't think it will be in movie theaters. So in order to see it, you got to get Netflix. So it makes a lot of sense. It made Netflix a ton of money. It made Adam Sandler a ton of money because he did not really have anyone watching over his shoulder. He made the deal. He said, I will give you what you want. If you give me carte blanche to do what I want. He hired people. He made this Adam Sandler movies that you expect. Every single one, no matter how bad or good, like Hubie Halloween and that Western one he did, those were all hits. Every single one hit number 1 on Netflix with massive amounts of viewers and helped drive Netflix into becoming one of the kings of streaming. And I will forever give Adam Sandler credit for that. And also, I've heard he's one of the nicest guys in the world. That being said, I've never been a big fan of his movies. Not a fan of Happy Gilmore. I know it's blasphemy. Billy Madison, Little Nicky, The Wedding Singer, decent. As is number 12, 50 First Dates. I really enjoyed 50 First Dates. Him and Drew Barrymore and him and Jennifer Aniston are the ones that have probably the best chemistry. Him and Julie Bowen may be okay. She's come back for Happy Gilmore too, so we'll see how that is after her Modern Family time. But Jennifer Aniston and Drew Barrymore are his true, real good co-stars that he works really well with. And 51st Dates was their follow-up to The Wedding Singer. An interesting premise. Drew Barrymore plays, and it's set in Hawaii, so you don't see a lot of movies set in Hawaii. Drew Barrymore plays a young woman who still lives with her family. And she doesn't remember this, but she was in a car wreck, and it caused her to have short-term memory loss, where she can remember, I think it's more than short-term memory loss. It's a specific problem where she only remembers the stuff. Her memory is only of the day before her car accident. She does not remember her car accident. She doesn't remember anything that's happened in the 3 to 4 years that has followed since then. And the reason why is because her dad and her brother, played by Sean Astin, don't want her to freak out, as it were. So, hello! To freak out, as it were. So they make it seem like it's the same day over and over again. And they've been doing it for years. And they have custom-made newspapers. They do the same thing. It's her dad's birthday, and they have the cake. They make the same cake. They make the same food. They have her repaint his garage. She paints the garage, and then at night, the dad repaints over it so that she can do it over again because that's all she remembers doing. And she doesn't remember anything after that. So one thing she does, she goes to this cafe every morning and has breakfast. And the cafe knows her issue as well, so they keep an eye on her as well. Cue Adam Sandler. Adam Sandler works at the Hawaii, like SeaWorld sort of place with the Rob Schneider's an annoying piece of shit. But he's annoying in this movie, but he's okay. But he's still kind of annoying in this movie. They work together in this like SeaWorld sort of park. And he sees Drew Barrymore and starts hitting on her. And they hit it off pretty good. And he doesn't know about her issue. And so the next day he goes back to see her and tries to do the same things that he did, the jokes that they had, the in jokes that they had, and like, you remember me, all this stuff. And she does not remember who the fuck he is because of her issue, because her day resets every night. So whatever happens that day, it resets to the beginning of the day again. That's how it works. So she doesn't remember anything previous to that. So she loses her mind when Adam Sandler starts doing stuff and starts like calling him as being a stalker and stuff like that. So the cafe staff has to let him know this is a situation. And eventually he meets up with her dad and brother, and they explain the situation to her even more. So he's likes her, and he decides that instead of having to redo everything over and over and over again, why don't we make a videotape to explain to her what happened and her issue that she has so that she can live kind of a normal life? And that makes a whole lot of sense. And so every day they make this video, and they replay the video and stuff like that. And Adam has to woo her every day. And eventually, so it gets a little weird in there near the end, but it's a cute romantic comedy, pretty decent cast. And that's why it's number 12. Number 11, I'm not the biggest Tarantino fan. I think he's a hugely overrated director, particularly by the film snobs. That being said, there are movies I do enjoy of his, and one of them is Kill Bill 2. Now, Kill Bill, which is number 11 on my list. Now, Kill Bill was supposed to be one film, but it was going to be like 4.5 hours long. And movie theaters are like, fuck that. We're not going to air a 4-hour movie. We're not going to make any money because you can only show it like 3 times a day. If that, you started at 12 o'clock, 12 to 4, one showing, and then like 8:30 to 12:30. You can maybe only show it twice, 12 to 4, 4 to 8:30, and then like 9 to 1, You can't make money off a 4-hour picture. So Tarantino cut it in half, released Kill Bill earlier, I think, and probably in 2003 because it wasn't listed in 2004, in 2003, and then released 2004 Kill Bill 2. Personally, I like Kill Bill 2 better than Kill Bill because it's the end of the storyline and the action sequences are a bit more intense. The first one had some really good fight sequences also, but it also had a lot of training montages in it and some of the creepy hospital stuff, which I wasn't a big fan of either. But that being said, Kill Bill 2 is an excellent film. It's not really a sequel because it's also one movie. So even though I call it a sequel and it's the third sequel on my list, it's not quite a sequel since it's one movie that Quentin had to split in half. I don't know if he's ever released a version where it has the entire movie on one like disc instead of it being split into two. I don't know if he's done that. I mean, I could probably look it up, but I'm not going to. But still well worth it. Kill Bill 2 is an excellent film. Uma Thurman does a phenomenal job, and you definitely get to see a lot of different influences that Quentin has, and he brings them to the forefront in this movie using different aspects of film and music and lighting, and the way he shoots each sequence is a little bit different. Makes this, to me, probably his most impressive film, Kill Bill and Kill Bill 2, because of the wide-ranging amount of different styles that he integrates into the movie, over both movies, I should say, over this 4.5 hour period. Everybody's going to still say Pulp Fiction is his breakthrough film. That is his breakthrough film, but is his best film. I don't agree with that. I think Pulp Fiction is hugely overrated. And when I do my overrated list, it's going to be on there. I'll tell you that one right now. But Kill Bill and Kill Bill 2, I do not believe are overrated. I believe they are absolutely excellent. It is a straight up revenge film. Quentin was born on or was raised on kung fu movies, and he finally gets to make his own kung fu movie with Uma Thurman, who does a phenomenal job. And just as I said, just the different styles of filming, lighting, the general cinematography is intense and awesome, and that's why it's number 11. Number 10 is another one I probably need to revisit. I've only seen it once. And again, I think the director is slightly overrated, but this is a fun film. That's why it's number 10. It's perfect for spooky season coming up. I'll probably rewatch it again during my rewatch of stuff when I get around to it. Shaun of the Dead, and it's celebrating an anniversary this week. It's 20th anniversary, dumbass. Hello. They're all 20th anniversary movies here. Shaun of the Dead is a... during the zombie, it was actually 2004 was before the zombie attack became huge with Walking Dead, because Walking Dead came years later, and that started the whole zombie craze that was going on. But Shaun of the Dead was a great British horror comedy about a zombie attack with a bunch of slackers, about how they have to survive the zombie attack while being, as I said, completely useless slackers. It's a fun film. It's a great cast, and has a definite, it's got its comedy, but it does have a definite emotional edge to it as well. And it's also fun for those people who like the horror aspect. It's a good collection of all that. Edgar Wright, to me, is still an overrated director, but I think Shaun of the Dead is not one of his overrated films, and I like it immensely. It's number 10. Number 9, I did see in the movie theater with my wife because she wanted to see it. It is probably the most original movie on the list. It is also probably the most bizarre movie on the list. It's Team America. Pause, because if you don't know who Team America is, let me enlighten you. Trey Parker and Matt Stone, creators of South Park, decided they wanted to do a movie using marionettes because when they were growing up, Thunderbirds, a TV show sent over from Britain, using marionettes in an action-oriented sort of show for kids was I even watched. I even like Thunderbirds. I watched a lot of Thunderbirds. I like Thunderbirds, and it was an influence, definitely. And it was influence on them as well. It's interesting to see these marionettes because they're the puppets that have the strings. You see the strings, and the set designs on Thunderbirds. They created sets and airplanes, and you see the airplanes flying. You see explosions and cities, and it is a very well done TV series. Is not your typical animated kid show, puppet show. It's really an intense, really good thing. So Matt and Trey decided they wanted to do something similar and created Team America while still using their satire skills and also their love of musical theater, because they're also the creators of the Book of Mormon. So Mark Scheinman, who also wrote the South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut musical, which was in the 1999 list, I believe, and was also one of the co-writers of the Book of Mormon stuff a couple of years later after this, wrote Team America as a musical. It is an action film, a satirical action film musical. And it's also a very raunchy, rated R film. In fact, they released an unrated cut because there's a sequence in the movie where we have marionette sex. And it is naked marionettes. The female marionette has tits. You don't see the marionette cock, but they are fucking. And they are actually going through different sex maneuvers. And what sequence they had to cut out to get it to an R rating was there's a bit where they poop and pee on each other. They cut that out. But it is puppet sex scene. It is an actual sex scene with them grinding on each other, sucking on puppet titties, her going down on his cock. You don't see the puppet cock, her bouncing on his cock, her getting fucked up against a wall, her getting fucked doggy style. Yeah. And there's also a sequence which pays homage to Monty Python, The Meaning of Life, where there is about a 2 to 3 minute vomit sequence, which is actually one of the worst parts of the movie. Again, done with marionettes. And again, the satirical aspect of it was 2004. We were in the midst of, it had been 3 years since 9/11 had happened. So we were still in the midst of this terrorist fear of things. We were embroiled in a war in Iraq and a war in Afghanistan. And the insane Republicans absolutely losing their fucking minds with patriotism and cheering when they were killing innocent people in Afghanistan and Iraq were just so obnoxious. And a lot of celebrities started seeing this as a bad thing. So Trey and Matt, being satirical, they take a satire of both aspects of it. They take a satirical look at the love of warmongering, and they also take a satirical look at the celebrity things where they have a ton of celebrity marionettes. The forefront's Alec Baldwin. You get Matt Damon and everyone else as well. And you have celebrities taking on the members of Team America as well. It's hard to describe this movie any more than that, but it is a very well-crafted film. The marionettes are realistic looking. They're done perfectly well. It's done in the Thunderbird style. You have the interior of the jets and stuff like that. The sets are amazing. It's great how everyone, when you first see the film, first scene of the film is, it's a puppet film. So it looks like that, there's a marionette sequence going on in a drawn cityscape, and you're thinking that's what the movie's going to be like. But then you pull back and you have a marionette puppeteer doing marionette puppets and a gorgeous Paris setting with beautiful buildings, stuff like that, a realistic look to it. It's a phenomenal piece of filmmaking by Matt and Trey. Mark Scheinman kills it with his musical numbers, even though it seems a little odd to have them. Right on the line of being some racist stuff. I'm So Lonely is the biggest one about that. But it is a biting, satirical look at warmongering and celebrity life. Nobody comes out of it unscathed. And you have a massive 5 to 7 minute puppet sex scene, all set to a musical. Words cannot describe this movie. And it's number 9 only because of the vomit sequence. And they do go a little far with some of the racist sort of stuff. And the satire does get a little old after a while. But it's still worth it. Still worth it to take a look at. I haven't seen it in a while. I'm afraid to almost. But it is a very well crafted, very well done movie. Number 8's a movie that snuck up on me and wasn't expecting much from it. So did not see it in the movie theaters. I did see Team America in the movie theaters, so I said that though. But then I started reading reviews of it years later and said, this sounds pretty decent. A lot of people seem to enjoy it. And it's from one of the directors of American Pie. So why not check it out? So I bought it on Amazon and I put it in and I enjoyed it thoroughly. Number 8 is In Good Company. Dennis Quaid makes an appearance again, as does Topher Grace, and a very, very young, just had her name too. God damn it. I hate getting old. Scarlett Johansson, that's what it was. A very, very young Scarlett Johansson. One of her earlier roles. In Good Company has Malcolm McDowell in it as well. In Good Company is a story of Dennis Quaid, who is a longtime worker at I think it's a newspaper. He's a sports writer or something like that, newspaper or something like that. And a new owner comes in and wants to change things up on how to do stuff, more do online stuff. With the advent of online stuff in the early 2000s was still finding its footing, but it was starting to build up a little bit more. So he brings in young Buck, played by Topher Grace, who basically becomes Dennis Quaid's boss. Dennis Quaid's been there for like 30, 40 years. Maybe not that long, but like 25 years at least. As a lifer, people thought he'd be a shoo-in for a management position, but then he has to answer to a kid who is like 20 years younger than him. And the guys, Topher Grace is not an asshole guy. He's trying to be nice, trying to connect with Dennis Quaid's character, but at the same time, he sort of has to be his boss. At the same time, Dennis Quaid discovers that his wife, his longtime wife, her late 30s or early 40s, is pregnant. So he needs this job, so he can't lose the job, but at the same time, he has to answer to a young, pissant little guy. Dennis Quaid does have a family already. I mean, he's been married to the same woman, so they have kids together, and they've been together forever, and obviously they still love each other because they had sex and she got pregnant. But one of their kids is very, very young Scarlett Johansson, who is just slightly younger by about a couple years than Topher Grace's character. And sure enough, Topher Grace meets her, and they sort of hit up a relationship. She goes to college at NYU and is a tennis star. And so now Dennis Quaid has to deal with Topher Grace not only as his boss, but also as the boyfriend of his young daughter, while also having to prepare himself for being a parent again, and for the possibility that he is an antiquated person and he might not even survive this new rebranding that is going on. So it is just a really good comedy drama. Great performances by Topher Grace is fantastic. Dennis Quaid is usually pretty good, and Scarlett Johansson, as young she is, early 18, 19, 20 years old, is really good as well. And In Good Company is a movie that a lot of people probably have never heard of before, but the reason why it's number 8 is because it is a really, really good movie. And if you have not checked it out, check the trailer out for yourself first and check it out. You can probably get it you might be able to get it on streaming somewhere, I don't know. But if you want to just get the DVD copy of a Blu-ray, the DVD copy is like $5, something like that. So it's well worth it. I have an extra copy. If you want one, give me your address. I'll mail it to you. It's such a good movie and I enjoy it. And it's just so unexpected. It's nothing huge about it. It is a good dramatic comedy film with great performances. Number 7, a lot of people are going to scream at me that it's inconceivable that I have it this high, but Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which is Harry Potter 3, which is the next sequel on the list here, is number 7. The reason why it's number 7 is because this is the first one without Chris Columbus being the director. And I think Chris Columbus was the only one who really nailed the Harry Potter aspect. Of course, he had the easiest ones to deal with, 1 and 2. Would have loved to see what he would have done with Prisoner of Azkaban, but he decided it was time to move on. He had spent basically almost 4 years working on these 2 movies, and he was burnt out. He wanted to do something else. So he was a producer, though, so he hired Alfonso Cuarón to do it, to give it a different flavor. Alfonso Cuarón went way overboard, got a new writer to come in and rewrite. And actually, they had the same writer, but Alfonso Cuarón had him cut a ton of stuff from Prisoner of Azkaban. Ton of stuff. The Quidditch World Cup stuff, which was what made Prisoner of Azkaban one of the more entertaining ones. The map of Hogwarts doesn't really get explained why it's more of a big deal than it is in the movie. You really just like, oh, here's a map. Where the books you explain what the map actually is and the connection to Harry in this one. They filmed it in a whole brand new location where the castle looks completely different than it did in the first 2 movies. Hagrid's cabin looks completely different than it did in the first 2 movies. Hagrid is played more as a clumsy giant instead of the lovable bear hug of a man that he is in the first 2 ones. They treat him as sort of this bumbling sort of thing. The Forbidden Forest is completely different than the first 2 films. So there is no actual continuity between the first 2 films and the third one. Alfonso Cuarón throws a lot of his Spanish heritage, Mexican heritage into aspects of the movie, which is absolutely fine. I have no problem with that. But again, it makes it for a kind of an off-putting sort of way of looking at the way the set is done. Now, yes, he did introduce David Thewlis and Gary Oldman into the cast, and those are 2 brilliant casting decisions for major characters in the Harry Potter story. I'll give him credit for that. And also, you could say that Chris Columbus has something to do that, being the producer as well. But Alfonso Cuarón still, as a director, still will get credit for doing that. So I'll give him a pass for those 2 because those are good things. And there are some aspects of the movie that gives you sort of that more crazy magicalness that a lot of people were saying was missing from the first 2 movies. I don't see it. I think the first 2 movies were just as magical as everything else. The third one, they just went a little overboard on some stuff, and they cut out a lot of stuff that probably they could have easily kept in there pretty easily. I understand you couldn't keep doing all the Quidditch stuff, but have them win the Quidditch World Cup is a major turning point in that as well. And actually, I believe Prisoner of Azkaban is one of the only ones that came out during the summer of the 8 Harry Potter movies. I think the last one was one of the other ones that came out. All the other ones, I think, were all sort of fall movies. And the fact that everybody just discounts what Chris Columbus did in setting up the world of Harry Potter in the movie theater and saying the first 2 are shitty, which is a bunch of bullshit, and that the third one is the greatest of all time. Again, movie snob assholes who see Alfonso Cuarón as this amazing director, who he's a decent director, but the snobs really slobber on these directors' knobs way too much, and it makes me become sort of hate-filled for them. There are, as I said, aspects of Prisoner of Azkaban that are really, really good. That's why it's number 7. But I just did not like the jarring differences that popped up between the first 2 films and the third one. again, you still had John Williams on music, which is one of the last ones he did on the music. And you still had Chris Columbus on there as producer. And you still have the same actors, and you introduced Thulis and you introduced Oldman, and they were perfect. They were great. And even Emma Thompson's character as well was introduced in this one too. That's great casting as well. So you got the casting down pretty good. It's just the jarring differences that are between the first two and the third one, and just the changing of Hagrid's character slightly. And I know you can't put everything you wanted to from the book into the movies, since 3 was longer than 1 and 2. But at least explain the map a little bit better. You never did, and that kind of pissed me off. And it's kind of an important, big deal. That's why it's number 7. So everyone says, what's your favorite Harry Potter movie? The majority of people are going to say Prisoner of Azkaban. So all for it. That's great. I like the first 2. I still think number 5 is still the best one. And I think number 4 gets a lot of hate, even though it shouldn't. Number 4 should have been divided into 2 movies, but it wasn't. Mike Newell did what he could with it, and I enjoyed it as well. And we'll get to that when that one comes out. It'll be on my list as well. But Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is number 7. Deal with it. Because I like this movie better. Number 6 is 13 going on 30. Jennifer Garner, Mark Ruffalo, outstanding, and Judy Greer, outstanding, and the guy who plays Gollum. I always forget his name. It pisses me off. Andy Serkis. In a role that is not Gollum. It is a regular role, and it's outstanding. 13 going on 30 is a new take on the body switching movie thing, a fresh take on it. It's a romantic comedy, and basically it's set with a girl turning 13, and she wants to be part of the popular crowd. A very, very young Brie Larson is a member of the popular crowd, and they are using her for their own ends, and they end up making fun of her and making her have a terrible 13th birthday party. So her one true friend, the boy next door who's in love with her, but she doesn't notice him because he's a porky photographer guy who likes more of the less pop 80s music and more talking head sort of stuff. He's like the cool offshoot of the 1980s where everybody hated them, but they were the guys that when they got older, they were the cool ones you wanted to hang out with because they were cool from the get-go. He makes her a doll's house with like magic powder to just spring sparkles to give it a little bit of life. She yells at him and insults him and ends up hiding in a closet and makes a wish that she wishes she was older. And the sparkles fall on her, and she transported to herself at the age of 30, now 17 years later. And she still has the mind of her 13-year-old self in the body of her 30-year-old self, played by Jennifer Garner. So Jennifer Garner does a phenomenal job of doing sort of like Tom Hanks did in Big, being the sort of, a 13-year-old kid inside an adult body sort of thing. And she's got to try to figure out what's going on. And the only way she does is she looks up her old friend, who's now played by Mark Ruffalo. As I said, he's a cool guy like that. And all of her dreams have come true. She works at a fashion magazine. She's friends with Madonna. But we also learn that she's a total bitch and a homewrecker. And her best friend, played by Judy Greer, is the head of the popular girls club that made fun of her back when she was 13. But Judy Greer, and here's the thing, and I will talk about Judy Greer in a second. And so they work at this fashion place, and Jennifer Garner's, before her 13-year-old self got in there, is not a nice person. She's a bitch. She's mean. She cheats on her. She cheats with people who are married or with other relationships. She is just a cutthroat bitch. But when you get the innocent 13-year-old version of her who, after what happened to her, she turns into that bitch. Before that happens, she's getting a look at what her life would have been like if she was popular. And it turns out she doesn't like it. So she's trying to get back to the life she is. And the fact that, Mark Ruffalo, who is her oldest friend that she pushed away, is the one she finds herself more interested in now when he's in his 30s. But he is engaged to be married also, and he's a photographer, and he's cool. She's got to figure out a way to change her life for the better and figure out how to change it. And she doesn't know if she's ever going to get back. So she eventually, spoiler, does get back to her 13-year-old self with full knowledge of everything that happened. And she comes out, and her pudgy friend is there, and they end up dating. And she doesn't become the bitchy friend. She becomes her own person. And then we fast forward that her and Mark Ruffalo are now married. So you got to feel bad for the woman who was supposed to marry Mark Ruffalo, but it's a romantic comedy, and it's a offshoot and multiverse, if you will, of that. And that's what makes the movie that entertaining. Now, real quick, I might even do this on my own, because there's a show I want to do called In Defense Of, and I might save this for that. I think I will. But there is a lot of talk that Judy Greer's character in 13 Going on 30 is the actual villain in the movie because of what happens later on. And I have to say, you're wrong. Because what Judy Greer's character does at the end, which is considered villainous, is completely justified if you think about what life with the previous Jennifer Garner was before she became the sweet, nice one, when she was a cutthroat bitch. It makes perfect sense what Judy Greer does. But I think I'm going to save that for my In Defense Of, and I'll write that down as something I need to do. So that'll be one. I do have a plan for the show where In Defense Of, where I'm going to do maybe multiple In Defense Ofs, and I'm only talking about maybe 15, 20 minutes in defense of certain things. And this will be one of them. I'll probably do that. So, plus it's getting late. I'm getting on about a minute 30 now. And we got 5 more, the top 5 right now. So let's roll through those. Number 5, Christmas is not that far away. And I know a lot of people despise this movie because of the dead eyes that the characters have. But Robert Zemeckis' The Polar Express is number 5, is I still believe is one of the best Christmas movies out there. Yes, it is the first ever real motion capture animated film, so they were still working out the bugs on it. And yes, the characters really have this sort of no blinking, soulless sort of look to them, but you don't want to look at that. You look at the story going on around them about a kid who is on that cusp of deciding that Christmas is not as exciting and real because he's growing up and Santa's not real. And he takes a train ride and meets a group of people that make him change his viewpoint on Christmas and Santa. And they end up going to the North Pole, and you meet up with Santa and all that stuff. Tom Hanks plays multiple roles in it, plays the conductor, plays Santa Claus, plays the creepy hobo at the top. The guy, the one kid from Spy Kids, the boy who's married to the All About the Bass singer, is the Daniel Sabaro is the main character like that, and we've got some other roles in there as well. It is a phenomenal Christmas movie. Great score by Alan Silvestri. Great story based on the kid's book. I like the animation, despite what everybody else says. The hobo stuff's a little weird. I'll give that a pass as well, because he's there to sort of be the other side of what you think of after if you stop believing in Christmas. It's sort of like this sort of what this hobo sort of thing is about. And the North Pole is weird. The elves are a little strange. But again, it is a fantastically visual feast. It is an amazing Christmas movie. I am going to do a Christmas movie list. It'll be high up on that Christmas movie list as well. I think people are not giving it the chance it's supposed to have because of the dead eyes. But you just look past that and just look at the story itself, the animation, the Christmas feeling of it all, and you realize that maybe it's not as bad as you think it is. So Polar Express is number 5. Number 4 is another incredible animated movie from Pixar, The Incredibles, their version of the superhero genre. Brad Bird directed it. He directed one of the greatest anime movies of the late 90s, 1999, The Iron Giant, that is underrated. And The Incredibles is not underrated. It is one of the most popular Pixar movies. Has spawned a sequel. The skins for 3 of the characters in The Incredibles are now in Fortnite as well. That's how popular it is. But The Incredibles is a great sort of early era 1940s, 50s sort of superhero genre thing, but in its own sort of timeless way. Great cast with Craig T. Nelson, Holly Hunter, Samuel L. Jackson, Jason Lee, and just the villain is great. The animation's outstanding. The story is a lot of fun. You do get a little bit more kind of adult sort of humor. You think about some stuff. It is a great film, a wonderful Pixar film, a great superhero movie. And it took forever for a sequel to come out, but the sequel is just as good as the first one. And that was on my sequels list. I think I had it up there as well. It's just as good as the first one. But the first one is still the original one. It has the best story and has the most interesting bits that happen in it, and a bit more of a emotional story considering the ties of the villain to the heroes. So Incredibles is fantastic. Number 4 on my list. Number 3 is the 5th of 6 sequels, Spider-Man 2, considered to be probably the best Spider-Man movie ever made. It's up there with No Way Out, or No Way Home, excuse me. I thought that was really well done also. But Spider-Man 2, Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire, not Claire Danes, Alfred Molina. I can't remember her name. It's killing me. I hate being old. Spoder Man. Kirsten Dunst. Okay. Is the one I thought of. So, great cast, great villain, and Alfred Molina's Doc Ock was a really good one. Really gives you a grasp of who Spider-Man is, where he wishes that he wasn't Spider-Man, and somehow his powers get blocked, and he becomes normal Peter Parker, and realizes normal Peter Parker is not as good as superhero Spider-Man Peter Parker. A decent film, probably. I think it's better slightly than the first one. I think it was also on my top sequels list as well. X-Men 2 also was a better sequel than the first one, for the first movie. So Marvel in the early days did a really good job with their sequels. So Spider-Man 2, saw that in the movie theater like on its last day in August when it was going to be movie theater down at the Ocean. It was Ocean City, actually. We were still going to Ocean City with my wife's family. So by myself in the movie theater, and it's a entertaining film. It's a great film, great villain, Alfred Molina, so good as Doc Ock. The storyline is phenomenal. Sam Raimi continues to probably be the best director Spider-Man ever had, Spider-Man 3 notwithstanding, but that was not really entirely his fault. But yes, Spider-Man 2 is number 3 on the list, and it deserves to be. It's so good. Number 2 might surprise a lot of people. I love this movie because I'm a history guy. It is one of the best PG sort of rated films, a family film that's exciting, an adventure. And we don't really see a lot of this. And the first time I saw it was in a hotel room in Philadelphia where the majority of the movie takes place. The movie's National Treasure. Nicolas Cage, directed by John Turteltaub. And basically it follows a guy who's grown up. It's a history guy who's been growing up, that he's told that there is a mystery treasure that was gathered up and held by the United States in the early days, but hidden because it has all kinds of stuff. And there's just all types of clues as where to find it. People have been trying to find it, but have never been able to find it. So he decides he's going to try to find it, but he needs the money to do it. So he teams up with a not so good person who just wants the money aspect of it. And they end up competing to try to go on this chase to try to find this national treasure. and they go through a bunch of historical places: Philadelphia, Washington D.C., the whole stealing of the Constitution. It is a fun. New York City is in there as well, so it's a fun, fun historical film. A great film to watch around 4th of July. If you're a history buff, you'll love it. Yes, there probably is no such thing as this national treasure, but it is the adventure itself which makes it entertaining, makes it sort of a modern day Raiders of the Lost Ark sort of feel to it. It is a family film. There's very little violence. There is some because it's an action film and the villains shoot and they fight and do all that stuff, but there's not really a lot of violence in it. There's not a lot of language in it. There's not any sex in it. It's just a fun adventure film, an exploration through history, which I'm always going to be a proponent of. And that's why it's number 2. If you have not seen it, I have not seen the sequel because the first one is just so perfect that there really is no reason that they should have done a sequel. But National Treasure is my number 2. One of the most fun movies out there, and one of those films I can watch over. I watch it around 4th of July every year because it is a perfectly patriotic, ensconced American history film with great performances. Finally, number 1 is my last sequel. And again, might surprise you why I put it as number 1, but it is my favorite of the trilogy, is Before Sunset. Before Sunrise came out back in the 90s. I watched that in college, and it's Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, directed by Richard Linklater. And the story couldn't be any simpler. An American on holiday in Europe who's heading on his way home the next day is flying out of Vienna, is on a train going to Vienna where he meets up with French student Julie Delpy, who had just been visiting his grandmother. And the two of them strike up a conversation. And since he doesn't have any money and he has to spend the day and night in Vienna before he leaves from Vienna airport, whatever, early in the morning the next day, and he has no money for a hotel room and just wants to wander around and look at Vienna, he would like it really good if he could hang out with this beautiful woman who he's been having a wonderful conversation with. She eventually relents, and the two of them just walk around Vienna having a conversation, slowly falling in love. Before Sunrise is an amazing movie. Ended on a great little cliffhanger where they said they were going to meet 6 months later. They weren't going to talk to each other before then to keep the dream alive of it being a dream sort of thing. And then we did not get the sequel until about 11 years later. Q 2004, Before Sunset arrives. Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy reprise their roles, also directed by Richard Linklater again. This time, 11 years has passed, and Ethan Hawke is now a very well-regarded author who's written a number of books. His most recent book is a write-up of his night with Celine, played by Julie Delpy. And the last of his European signing tour is in Paris, France, which was sort of in the back of his mind because he wanted to see if she would come to see him because he has no way of contacting her. And sure enough, she shows up and they reconnect, and we learn that Ethan Hawke did go back to Vienna to meet up in December, but Celine never showed up. And the reason why is because her grandmother died. It wasn't because she wanted to stand him up. And she had no way of contacting him, telling him that she was not going to be coming because of her grandmother's death. So to him, she sort of short-shafted him. And to her, she's devastated because she couldn't get in contact with him. But the two of them reconnect. They work out their issues. And they, again, he's leaving from Paris on a midnight, at like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, flight from Paris back to America. And we get caught up with the characters. Ethan Hawke is married, but his marriage is on the rocks. He has a son. And Julie Delpy's dating a photographer. She's working for a human rights organization and living there in Paris. And it is shot in real time because they only have about an hour and a half before he has to leave to go to the airport to fly home. So they try to reconnect and see if there could be something to their relationship. And it is a much more mature, much more interesting conversation than the first one. The first one, they're in their 20s. Ethan Hawke's character is kind of a dickhead. The story, as I said, the story is fantastic. It's great. And that's what you want. You want fully rounded characters, and you get that in Before Sunrise. And then you want differences in the characters as they've changed over 11 years, and you get that in Before Sunset. Ethan Hawke is now a browbeaten, down on himself, sort of my life is terrible sort of mode, and she is a hyperactive, stressing sort of thing, and the two of them reconnect to sort of get their lives back to normal. Some of the greatest lines, is like he's one line Ethan Hawke says, "I'm always afraid if someone touches me, I'm going to turn into molecules." And Julie Delpy gives him a hug, and she's like, "How you doing?" And he's like, "Sticking together." It's one of the best sequences there, and you get another good cliffhanger ending, which sort of makes you cheer about what happens, where they said they would meet up again 6 months before Sunrise, and they didn't. But this one looks like that they're going to be staying together. And then we have to wait to find out what happens. So fast forward 10 more years later, down the line, you get Before Midnight, which is not as good as the previous two, but still pretty decent for the trilogy. And we find out what happens with them then. But Before Sunset, shot in real time in Paris in the summer. Ethan Hawke's character is a whole lot less annoying than he was in Before Sunrise. Julie Delpy's character is a bit more annoying, so they sort of flip roles a little bit. But when you get into the nitty gritty of their characters, you can understand why they're acting the way they are. Before Sunset is an absolutely lovely film. It is number one in my top 20 films of 2004 because it just is that good, and got nominated for Best Screenplay. And absolutely deserved it, but it should have gotten some other nominations as well because it is a phenomenal movie, a wonderful movie, a great movie. Again, just two people talking, but if you saw Before Sunrise, it's fun to see where they're at now and see the character development between the first movie and the second one, and how their lives are not perfect in some aspects and perfect in other aspects. It is just a great film. And that's why it's number one. That is my list, top 20 films of 2004. Thanks for spending an hour and 37 minutes of your time listening to this. I will be doing more list shows hopefully down the line. And hopefully this In Defense of Story show I got planned will come to fruition as well, because I really do want to defend Judy Greer at 13 going on 30. She absolutely deserves to be defensed in that. So that's all I got now. I'm going to head out. I've got about 4 hours before the Ravens play. I'm going to get caught up on the 1 o'clock game, see how my fantasy team's doing, and get involved, maybe watch some Washington Commanders football. All right, thanks for watching, and don't watch out for my regular show, Dylan Knows. New episode is going to be dropped on Facebook and Twitter within the next day or so, and a new episode will appear on Saturday. Thank you.